Well, hello, and welcome once again to another edition of Pray on This. Before we get going, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. I thought today I'd be a little bit more educational instead of dealing with a pressing issue of the day. So, election polls, the real deal. We've all seen election opinion polls. Hell, during a minority parliament like we have right now, we see all the companies doing them almost weekly, bi-weekly at minimum. We see polls from Nanos, Abacus Data, Main Street, Angus Reid, Ledger, Ipsos Reid, Ecos. Hell, the big four have put out a poll each in the last 5 days. And the reports can swing wildly. One will have the Conservatives by up as much as 7 percentage points. The other might have the Liberals leading by 1 or in a statistical tie. It's why most people don't believe the polls. It's also why 1 month you'll have Liberals beating the heads of their Conservative family members and friends, if they have any Conservative friends, over the head with the, "If we're so bad, how come we're leading in this poll?" Then 2 days later, a different poll says the Conservatives are up by 5. The discord swings 180 degrees. It's why most Canadians echo what politicians and their staffs say. The only poll that matters is Election Day. However, a Pierre Poilievre, Justin Trudeau, or their hired guns like a Katie Telfer or a Corey Knight have very different reasons for saying it than you or I. The reason is based on vastly different knowledge than the 2 or 3 co-workers in the break room or around the office water cooler. Here's why. The media will release to you and I, the general public, only the answer to the big questions. The headline will say, "We polled 1,000 Canadians and asked them if an election was held today, who would you vote for?" But there's no reasoning behind it, no context. Now, how the data was collected. They won't even tell you how they phrased the question, if there was any other answers given, or where they made the calls to. All of that information is very important. If we were to do a poll survey of 2,000 people right now, and we get answers from multiple regions, multiple ridings, across a broad spectrum of Canadians, the answer to that big question is very accurate. Like 9,999 times out of 10,000, that poll is right. However, if a poll taken from across the country gets the majority of answers from Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, and say Lethbridge, well, that's going to skew the numbers. Similarity, if you take the poll and you get your answers from southwestern Ontario, Quebec City, or the BC interior, again, wildly different swings going the other way. However, that's not the real reason that those with inside baseball knowledge of politics who have access to all the data will tell you that a snapshot poll doesn't matter. The real inside knowledge of poll is the answer the media will never show you when you watch the news or read the Star, the Sun, or the Globe. They'll not show you these numbers for a variety of reasons. 1, they're hard to explain. 2, they can swing wildly, and even with inside the polls, the answers can contradict. And I think the biggest reason, they don't paint the picture that that particular news agency wants to tell you. So here's the absolute truth. I'm not going to tell you when I read a poll like the current Nanos that has the CPC at 35, the LPC at 29, and the NDP at 20, I'm not happy, or that I'm not smiling. However, I know something most of you don't. There are 4 other major factors you will never hear about in the mainstream media. You see, those poll numbers I just read are a snapshot of today, but they don't tell you the trend. The difference is this. Trudeau had a major bump in the polls for 4 days after he testified at the Emergency Inquiry Act. He also got a big bump after the First Minister's meeting over health care. Both those things went very well for him. Those polls caused people to think, oh, look, the Liberals are on a comeback. When I take a look at the polls, I don't look at just the snapshot. I look at the 4 other major factors plus the snapshot. That is, who do you think would make the best prime minister? Would you consider supporting any other party? How big an effort will you make to vote on election day? And finally, if no party has your support right now, are you leaning one way or the other? What we call this is the power rating. It's the power rating that tells you whether or not a snapshot poll really matters. If that power rating is flexible, all polls are possible. But if it's consolidated, like the one that we're seeing right now is becoming, there's only one real answer. I will explain. The federal Liberals' overall popularity among voters has been slipping since they were first elected in 2015. It started at 39%, fell to 33 in 19, dropped to 32 in 21, and has slipped even further. Since September of last year, it's been hovering around 28.5%. Sure, there's been a few polls that have them higher, but they haven't broke 32% nationally. 28.5% is the average, and that number's pretty solid. First, second, and third choice of voting is Liberal. But when I do the deep dive in the numbers, only 78% of Liberal voters think that Justin is the best Prime Minister. 15 to 20% are willing to consider voting for the NDP, the Greens, or the Conservatives in the next election. And only 2/3 say for sure they're going to make it out to vote on Election Day. When I look at all the numbers, the Liberals do not have what I call a high power rating. They are led by a Prime Minister that is nationally not liked. But the issue is that 1/4 of their voters don't trust Trudeau as Prime Minister. 1/5 of the support could change, and only 2/3 are planning for sure to vote on Election Day. The party's popularity is shrinking, and I don't think they know how to change it. Even a poll I saw recently with a change of Liberal leadership doesn't give them a noticeable bump in support. I wish I could say things get better for the Liberals, but I'm sorry, it really doesn't. And here's the reason why. The NDP numbers are solid. That 20% they've been hovering around, it's been consistent for 7 months. Jagmeet Singh's national preferred numbers as Prime Minister are within decimal points of Trudeau. When we do a deeper dive into the NDP vote, 95% of their voters are NDP through and through. No thoughts of strategic voting. 97% of NDP voters think Jagmeet Singh is the best choice for PM, and 88% of them are going to make a serious commitment to get out and vote. The party would love to have some more support, but they've got 3 things. The support they have right now is solid. It's going to show up on Election Day, and they have room for growth. As for the Conservatives, well, that 35 to 36% number they are showing, well, that's turning into a solid vote. It's almost all people who say they're voting Conservative, it's their only choice. Pierre Poilievre nationally is the choice of Canadians for Prime Minister, and when I do a deep dive into the Conservatives, they have the best numbers. Their current support is at a 97% rating. That's 97 out of 100 people who say they're going to vote Conservative are 100% that's their choice. Even the 3% that are wavering, they're not considering the Liberals. Pierre Poilievre is not only the preferred choice of all Canadians to be Prime Minister, he is almost unanimously the choice of the Conservative voter. Their voters are extremely committed to getting out and voting. Over 95% say they are going to be there on Election Day. And finally, they're the only major party who's gaining support and growing the tent. The vote they have is solid, it's growing, and it's very, very close to a consolidated vote. I know the Liberals will say, yeah, but we're not in an election right now. And you're a Conservative, John. You're going to point as bad a picture as you can. Well, I won't lie. I do feel very good about the numbers. But there's one other element I haven't talked about yet. That's growth potential. When you take out the big threes numbers, we're left with about 16% of Canadians. Now, nationally, we can really take half that number out of the equation too, because the Bloc and the Green do have a solid base. So we have about 8% of potential voters who right now have made up their minds. But if we go to the past to take an educated guess on how this undecided vote is going to break, we have to consider a few things, but the biggest one is human nature. We all like to support a winner, or at least who has the best chance of winning on our side. So if you're center to center right, you're probably going to vote conservative. If you're center to center left, you're probably going to vote NDP. The Liberals are in a fall. The NDP is on the rise. The Conservatives is on the rise. The undecided vote in Canada is a zero-sum game, and it is brutal. It can change the fortunes of an election, but it hurts the party that's on the downward slide more than anybody else, especially in a change election or bad economic times. This next election is going to be a change election, and it's going to be in bad economic times. That is a lose-lose for the Liberals. When I look at the polls right now, I actually see a major shift. I've seen a shift like this before twice in my life, and both, as history goes, are relatively recent. The first time I saw a shift like this was federally 2011, and then provincially in Ontario in 2018. But the one that mirrors today's situation the most is the Ontario provincial election of 2018. We had a Liberal government seeking a fifth straight election win. We have Trudeau looking for a fourth. And the governing party went into that election with numbers close to what Trudeau has right now, and they were destroyed. And I'll tell you why. Because when they first came to power, it was very much a Liberal party. Residents of the center used touchy, feel-good programs that the NDP would champion, but apply soft, conservative fiscal policies to them to make them palatable to the general public. When they won the election, they implemented those programs. Yes, they raised taxes. Yes, they spent more, but there was a degree of prudence. However, each following election, the Tories chased them, and they got softer and gentler, with a leader first like John Tory, and then Tim Hudak. Each time, closer and closer to the center, closer and closer, and softer. And each time they did that, first Delta McGuinty and then Kathleen Wynne moved further and further left, doubling and even tripling down on more and more social programs, higher and higher spending, bigger and bigger deficits, and deeper green policies, to the point that the Green Revolution in Ontario had almost a religious fundamentalism to it. Finally, the Conservatives decided to be conservative and chose a man to lead them who had a record of cutting costs, talking simple and straight, and using common sense. That was Doug Ford. Like him or hate him, he's very electable. And when the election came, 5 days before Election Day, Kathleen Wynne admitted she was going to lose. She just had no idea how bad. So I will actually agree with most people when they see that Nanos poll today on CTV and read it in the Globe and Mail and say, well, it's just one poll. Those numbers don't mean anything because there's no election on. However, when they say the polls don't matter, I totally disagree. And I disagree because of these more in-depth factors. And the same mirror that I see between the 2018 Ontario political landscape and the 2023 federal political landscape. In 2018, the NDP ended up replacing the Liberals in what you would call, I'd rather be dead than vote anything but left ridings. And the Tories took not only their traditional ridings, but almost every swing riding too. It became a structural change in Ontario because the NDP and the Liberals are now, and have been for the last 5 years, in a statistical tie for voter support, with the NDP having the upper hand in both having an efficient vote and being the choice of strategic voters. However true the statement may be of Justin Trudeau supporters that Justin has changed Canada, and he has, it is not to the degree that they want you to believe. It's definitely not to the degree that they believe. What Justin has really done has changed the once mighty Liberal Party of Canada. Much like his Ontario provincial counterparts, he, or more likely his team of Katie Telford, Gerald Butts, and others, realized the mistakes of Paul Martin, the hard green shift of Stéphane Dion, the obvious turn left of Michael Ignatieff, They'd convince Justin Trudeau, move back more towards the center, and then ride the spirit and the coattails of your Prime Minister daddy all the way to 24 Sussex Drive, and he did so and beat Harper. After winning, he moved left. And then when Andrew Scheer looked like he might put on a challenge that no one expected, he moved even harder left. Then, after a couple of years, he went for the brass ring to get that majority again. He called it an election in the middle of the pandemic, used even more left-wing tactics, and the worst of identity wedge politics issues to beat O'Toole. Since the backlash of that election and the Freedom Convoy, Justin's been moving even further left and harder green. He's not just sharing lunch with Jagmeet Singh anymore, he's stealing it. When I look at the polls, I do not consider one or two factors. I look at the entire poll. I look at history to see if anything like this has happened before, and it has. The trends, the changes, and the consolidated gains to date for the Conservatives tell me that the Honorable Pierre Poilievre very soon will be known as the Right Honorable Pierre Poilievre, Prime Minister of Canada. The reason I make these statements and this prediction is this. Justin Trudeau from 2013 to today has used the exact same playbook that the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals used. Now that should not be a shock. Telford and Butts are the same Telford and Butts that cut their teeth and pulled the strings on first the McGuinty, then the Wynne campaigns. The same start moderate, keep to the middle lane, go left to steal ideas, go right to make them sound affordable. Once we have power, go left, go green, tax the hell out of whatever we don't like, and when people bitch, spend, spend, spend. I think the only reason that we're at the same point federally that Ontario was at in 2018, but 5 to 7 years earlier, is two reasons. Neither Scheer or O'Toole were what you would call a top-tier opponent, and the Conservatives didn't wait 15 years to find a top-shelf leader like Pierre Poilievre. The second is both Katie and Gerald are very experienced when they came to Justin. They didn't have that experience when they started helping McGuinty. The only thing the polls right now do not tell me is will Poilievre be the 24th or the 25th Prime Minister of Canada? Will Justin Trudeau continue to believe that he can, against all odds, pull victory from the very hungry jaws of defeat, just salivating right now to taste his defeat? Or will he take a walk on that very sandy beach of Tofino, British Columbia, and between his walk of the sand and surfing the waves, does he decide, I don't need this. I don't need the embarrassment of this defeat, and leave? From what I've seen, whether it's Justin Trudeau or whoever the Liberal Party of Canada's version of Kim Campbell, the sacrificial lamb, is, the real question, is this the last ever Liberal Party of Canada Prime Minister? Remember, Kim Campbell was the last progressive conservative Prime Minister of Canada, and the party no longer exists. I know many Liberal Party diehards and cult of Justin Trudeau disciples will tell me that I'm wrong. I'm just a right-wing alt nut who doesn't know what I'm talking about, including a former friend of mine named Andrew. Andrew kept track of my election predictions since Harper in 2008. He had had enough of our discourse and my predictions in 2022. Once I properly learned how to read and understand the polls, I have only made two minor mistakes in every Ontario provincial election and every federal election since 2008. In 2018, I predicted Wynne would lose, but I thought she would get 16 to 18 seats. I didn't think she'd only get 7. And in 2022, I did say Doug Ford would win. I did say it would be a majority. But I did not believe that he could make it a bigger majority and get that majority within 22 minutes of the polls closing. I have a very good election prediction record. I have predicted every government and the finish of every party in every federal and Ontario provincial election since 2008. I'm open to take bets from anyone who wants to take my record on. That is always is prey on this. Once again, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The weather's turning nice, spring is here. I hope that you all have a lovely day, and I will talk to you again real soon.